everyone. I'm Ronnie Foreman, and I'm a commercial sales manager here at SpaceX. I'm excited to join you and Kate to cover the IS-40e mission tonight. With liftoff just about 7 minutes from now, I want to talk to you first a little bit more about the rocket supporting tonight's launch. Our Falcon 9 vehicle that you see on the pad is a two-stage rocket designed and manufactured by SpaceX. Standing 229 feet tall, the Falcon 9 is about 40 feet taller than the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy. And for all you Star Wars fans out there, Falcon 9 was named after the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. The number 9 indicates the number of Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, which make up the bottom two-thirds of the vehicle. Speaking of the first stage, its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to space, and then separate from the rest of the rocket. This first stage, also referred to as the booster, is flying for the fourth time.
RP1 load complete.
There you hear the call out that we've completed RP1 loading into the booster, which again is flying for the fourth time today. It previously supported CRS-26, OneWeb Launch 16, and a past Starlink mission. We will attempt to recover this booster again on our drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas, which is currently positioned in the Atlantic Ocean, and you can see it on your screen now. If successful, that will mark our 184th landing of an orbital-class rocket, including both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy side boosters. Moving on up, above the first stage is the second stage, which has a single Merlin vacuum, or MVAC engine, that ignites after stage separation. The second stage is what will carry the Intelsat 40e and NASA Smithsonian Tempo payload to orbit. Speaking of the payload, it's currently safely tucked inside the 17-foot diameter payload fairing that you see on your screen now. It's a large barrel structure with a pointed nose at the very top of the rocket. Made of carbon composite material, the fairing protects the payload from aerothermal heating and contamination on its trip to space, before being jettisoned approximately 3 minutes into flight. Much like the first stage, the fairing halves on today's flight are flight-proven. One half is flying for the second time and the other for its 8th.
Tanks present for strong back retract.
There you hear the call out that we're getting ready for strong back retract. After separation, those fairing halves will return to Earth to be recovered by our recovery vessel, Doug. And the large trussed structure that you see next to Falcon 9 is what we were just talking about on the nets. That's the transporter erector, or TE for short. We use it to roll the rocket out to the pad and raise it to its vertical launch position ahead of takeoff.
Strong back lower started.
The call out there says that we're beginning to pull the TE away from the vehicle. The TE also routes the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems to the rocket and satellites until Falcon 9 transfers to internal power and clears the pad. There you can see the clamp arms are opening up beneath the fairing in preparation for full TE retraction.
And as Ronnie mentioned, those clamp arms are now open, and we should hear the call out momentarily that the strong back is reclining. Actually, I think we can see it there on screen now. At T0, the ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE even further away from the Falcon 9 as it lifts off. We heard that call a little bit ago for the ground closeouts. We'll now see some more of that liquid oxygen venting from the TE as those lines are now closed out to the vehicle.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
All right, there's that call out letting us know that the onboard flight computers have taken control of the launch countdown.
LD, go for launch.
And there's our final go for launch tonight coming from our launch director. We're now at T-minus 35 seconds. All systems are go for launch of Falcon 9 with the Intelsat 40e and NASA
30 seconds.
And the NASA Smithsonian Tempo payload. Let's listen in to the terminal count.
$15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engines full power and lift off of Intelsat 40E. Go Intelsat, go Falcon.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
L1D chamber pressure on.
If you're just joining us, those gorgeous views on your screen mean that Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. During
Nominal power and telemetry.
the call out there that nominal power and telemetry for the vehicle. During this phase, which is called ascent, we tilt the engines. The technical term for this is called gimbaling, and that turns the rocket horizontally in what we call a gravity turn.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
There's a call out that Falcon 9 is now traveling faster than the speed of sound. During this period, we're still going up, but we're also heading horizontally away from the launch
Max
pad.
Q.
Just moments ago, we throttled down in preparation for max Q, which is the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure that the vehicle will see on ascent. So that's what's happening right now. The rocket typically needs to go about 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back to Earth and reach orbit. Now we're going to have 3 events coming up in quick succession, starting with main engine cutoff, stage separation, and second engine start 1. Main engine cutoff, or MECO, is the point during the flight where we shut down the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. Shortly after that, stages 1 and 2 will separate from each other so that the second stage isn't carrying unnecessary mass to orbit. And of course, the first stage booster begins its trip back to Earth. The last call out you heard was about the MVAC engine. That's what we're going to start up during SES-1, or second engine start 1. That's the period during the flight where we'll ignite the Merlin vacuum engine on board the second stage for the first time. So we'll see all 3 of those happen back to back just about 10 seconds from now.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
So there you heard and definitely saw those great views on your screen. 3 events happening back to back: main engine cutoff, stage separation, and SES-1. Coming up next will be fairing separation in just a couple of seconds. During this portion of the flight, we'll jettison both fairing halves and then attempt to retrieve them again today.
Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories. Fairing separation confirmed.
There we've got confirmation of fairing separation, which means both fairing halves are on their way back to Earth to be recovered by our recovery vessel, Doug. Coming up next, there are 2 burns for our first stage as we prepare for landing on our drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas.
Stage 1, entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
All right, so there on that left-hand side of your screen, those stage 1 views are back. We can see that entry burn has begun, and it's also illuminating the grid fins, which help to steer the booster for re-entry and also to make a precise landing.
Stage 1, entry burn shut down.
All right, we can see that entry burn has
Both
concluded.
vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
MVAC shutdown.
All right, there's that call out telling us that we had successful shutdown or cutoff of that.
Stage 1, landing burn.
You can see landing burn has begun there on that screen.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
You can see those grid fins working hard to steer it back to the drone ship for its landing.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Great call out there indicating we've
Stage
got
1, landing leg deploy. Stage 1, landing confirmed.
There you can see on your screen an amazing view as always. That landing marks SpaceX's 184th recovery of an orbital class rocket, including first stage landings for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. The mission isn't over just yet. We did hear the call out telling us that the second stage achieved good orbit, so it is now embarking on its first coast phase. After this coast phase, we will light that MVAC engine for a second time, and that will happen around the T plus 26 minute mark. So hang tight, we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
Welcome back to the SpaceX webcast. Tonight's Falcon 9 mission is carrying the Intelsat 40e and NASA Smithsonian Tempo payload for our customer, Intelsat. We've had a nominal mission so far. Falcon 9 launched on time at 12:30 a.m. Eastern from Space Launch Complex 40, and then successfully landed on our drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. While the second stage completed its first burn, taking our payload into its initial parking orbit. We're just about 5 seconds away from a second ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine, which will carry the second stage and today's payload into the orbit needed to deploy the satellite.
Back ignition.
There's the confirmation we've got for SES-2, second engine start 2. This burn of the MVAC engine is planned to last just about a minute. Right now you can see the MVAC skirt glowing orange as it burns. As the engine burns. While the MVAC and Merlin engines on board the first stage are quite similar, the MVAC is unique in that it's been optimized to perform in the vacuum of space, which gives it its name, Merlin vacuum. Just about 10 seconds to go on this burn before we expect to hear the call out for SECO 2.
MVAC shutdown.
There's the confirmation of MVAC shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
That call out confirms that we're in the correct orbit. So right now, the payload is still attached to Falcon 9's second stage, with deployment scheduled in just about 4 minutes. While we wait, sit back and enjoy the views.
As a reminder, our customer for today's mission is Intelsat, and their IS-40e payload is a geosynchronous communication satellite that also features a NASA payload, TEMPO, or Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring Pollution. The payload will be operated by Intelsat, but TEMPO is a partnership between NASA and the Smithsonian Institution's Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory.
Payload separation confirmed.
A beautiful view there, as you can see, and as we heard called out, successful confirmation of the Intelsat 40e and NASA Smithsonian Tempo payload.
All of us here at SpaceX want to give a big thank you to our customer,
Signal Capone.
Intelsat, for entrusting us
Primary.
with today's mission. We also want to give a shout out to the Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's launch. Tonight's flight concludes SpaceX's 222nd overall mission to date and our 23rd launch of 2023. Thanks to all our viewers for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the rest of your morning, and we'll see you again soon.